I want to say thank you for coming, taking some time out on your Friday. I will be moderating this conversation today. Professionally, I sit as the Director of First Year Admission and Operations for the University of Rhode Island, but I'm also a board member of AI in College Admission, and so I'm thrilled to be joined by four incredible panelists. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves so that you know who you're hearing from today. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Rose. And Rose, when you're done, if you want to kick it over to the next person in line, that would be great.
Sure. Thanks so much. My name is Rose. I'm the founder of the New Face of Artificial Intelligence, which is a division of the New Face of Inclusion. The New Face of Artificial Intelligence is a organization that supports non-technical professionals that would like to transition to a career in AI ethics, safety, or governance. We do that through career support, community, and AI education and literacy. I will send it over to Megan.
Thank you, Rose. My name is Megan Schneider. I'm coming from sunny Florida, the West Coast. This is an open invitation for anybody to visit us. I am the Associate Director, Senior Associate Director of College Counseling here, as well as the Upper Division Diversity Coordinator. And I have been at Shorecrest for almost 20 years and have played a variety of roles in college counseling and the admissions world from the high school side. I will kick it to Nathan.
Thanks, Megan. Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm Nathan Greenstein. I am a senior AI analyst at ASA Research, research and evaluation firm. Previously, I've been at the University of Oregon, and my work and research is in AI ethics and equity, especially pointed towards higher ed. Previously, I've worked in forecasting student outcomes and analyzing text data with emphasis on doing things with proper ethics and equity guardrails and stakeholder engagement around it. And I will kick it over to my colleague, Sungwoo Cho.
Great. Thank you, Nathan. My name is Sungwoo Cho. I'm a partner at ASA Research. I had the pleasure of working with Nathan in a various number of capacities here at ASA, where we do data analytics, data science in higher education settings. And previously at the University of Oregon, where I was Associate Vice Provost for Academic Data Analytics, where we ran predictive models for student retention purposes and also created text analytics algorithms to make sense of large numbers of text. I guess in my spare time, I also teach at the University of Maryland. I teach graduate students in quantitative methods. And I'm also an alumni interviewer for Stanford. And I also have helped a couple of local high schools with regard to helping their students think about college. Really happy to be here.
Great, wonderful. Thank you all. We have, as you can see, an amazing panel of experts to speak to a really vast area around ethical use of AI with college admission. And we know that this is a growing conversation platform, so we do not expect to get to every piece of this today, but we'd like to introduce a couple of areas that we know we want to focus on. So we are going to spend some time talking about the actual applicant, so students themselves, some of the areas that the folks on the panel can speak to. We will speak a little bit more about college admission and the college admission role, counselors in those offices, how those decisions and things are made. And then if we have time, we will push ourselves into a space thinking about bias and equity within the AI space of college admission. So I'm going to kick us off with our first question, again, thinking about the high school student specifically. So thinking a little bit more about first year traditional students, traditional age students. How can we use AI to leverage essay topics, brainstorming, etc.? So really basic level questions for AI without overstepping ethical boundaries. And if I may call on Megan as a counselor.
I was going to jump in. As a counselor, we are a pre-K through 12 school, and college counseling begins in 9th grade. Responsible AI use is something that is part of our curriculum throughout the school. With regard to college admissions, I think that it's or using it in your applications. It's more of a teaching a responsibility and teaching a philosophy of how to use it rather than use these tools, don't use these tools. It's growing so rapidly that those lists would become obsolete within, days. So it's more about teaching responsibility with AI and what are you looking for? How does this help you with your authentic voice? There's nothing better than your own voice straight out, but there may be some tools that can help that.
And to the rest of the panel, following up on that, are there any tools that you are seeing in your spaces right now that you would say students are either using readily, or you would recommend over another tool? Again, not supporting one platform or another, but what are you seeing students using that really allows them to think about the responsible use of AI? So any tools in that college prep process that you've seen particularly helpful, or things that would be accessible to students from a wide variety of backgrounds?
I mean, I don't teach high school students, but I teach graduate students, PhD level students at the University of Maryland. One thing I keep hearing about some of my students using Grammarly and using it on a fairly frequent basis to get their thoughts out there on paper and then use the tool to help refine and focus. Um, as Megan mentioned, I mean, these tools and iterations of tools are coming out so quickly that what we're using now might be obsolete in a year, might be obsolete in a few months. And so it's really tough to keep ahead of these things that are coming out. But that's one thing that I've been hearing from my graduate students.
I'm not sure if this has a lot of traction yet, but a lot of these tools that were previously seen as really just for generative purposes, like ChatGPT, are getting better at doing research. And I think there are certainly ethical concerns with replacing your own work with these and then passing it off as yours. But I think there is a role for research tools in assembling a list of colleges that you would be interested in and what the different requirements might be, how to prioritize, what to look for, what people are saying. There is just too much information on the internet about the college search process for anyone to process through. And this is a role for the computer to process it for you to some extent. There are concerns about errors, data integrity, hallucinations, as they call it, if the AI makes something up. But with a little bit of skepticism and common sense, I think AI as a research tool in early stages of the search could be really valuable. And using it for that, you can sort of reduce the burden on your time as a student without, I think, getting into the ethical gray areas of generating text with the tools.
Great, thank you. And then kind of flipping the script on the desk, as we like to say here, are there any specific recommendations you would have, or how can school counselors go about using AI to help assist them in supporting their students? We know caseloads are getting larger and larger. Students are applying to more schools than they were 10 years ago. So what are recommendations, or what are you seeing as things that can support our school counselors? And again, without compromising the ethical considerations that school counselors have. Does anybody want to take that to start?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for workflow automation, which can be done with or without a AI-powered tool, but making use of an LLM in a workflow can be really powerful. And I think the opportunity there is to really, free up administrators from repetitive tasks or time-intensive tasks that they have to complete on a some sort of frequent or cadenced basis. I imagine that there is a plethora of tasks that fall into that category. And so there's kind of that low-hanging fruit right there in terms of just automating pieces of the workflow where it doesn't require an extensive amount of critical thinking or brain capacity, and it's quite rudimentary. That's somewhere that AI can be used to really support the administration side of admissions.
Excellent. Thank you, Rose. And I think all of us sort of benefit from starting to think more broadly about what things we can maximize our time in the spaces that we need to be and put into some sort of AI tool to help us with that. So I think that's a great point. Thinking about that, we're going to move a little bit to the admission side, which certainly I can speak to as someone overseeing admission at a flagship. But I'm curious, as far as thinking about how do we use AI to identify or mitigate bias in the admission process? This is a very popular topic right now. I know all of you have thought about this a little bit. I'm curious if anybody would like to take that and offer some feedback on when we're thinking about the actual admission process itself. On the college side. So
I think
go ahead.
Go
Go ahead, Rose.
I was just going to say, I think there's a great opportunity to use AI as a tool to help mitigate bias. I just want to, and I'm sure everybody has already considered this and is already thinking about it and was going to say it, but just making sure that, we're not reinforcing bias using AI, which is something that we have seen, very commonly, unfortunately. I think, making decisions around models or tools is going to be really important when trying to use AI tools to help reduce bias because of that kind of inherent, relationship between the human input, which then guides the way that the AI is performs or the type of outputs that it creates. And so really being mindful about, the fine tuning or the opportunities to really direct the AI model, the LLM or whatever tool you're using in a way that's going to be that's going to help really achieve the reduction in bias versus amplifying the bias.
So I was going to say, I know you wanted to add as well.
I was going to defer to Nathan on some points with regard to bias and text, but this made me think, and I can't speak on behalf of the University of Oregon because we don't work there anymore. But when we were there under the provost and trying to predict student success in terms of next term and eventual graduation metrics, we were thinking about these things all the time in terms of not perpetuating any biases into our models for predicting which students were most likely to not make it to the next term. So we think and continue to think about these things with regard to mitigating bias. And Nathan, if you have any thoughts with regard to text.
Yep, all true and good points, Rose. Also, I think as has been said, the first thing we think about is not entrenching existing bias using tools that have learned from biased human decision makers. But that's sort of the do no evil approach, right? That should be the baseline. In terms of actually using tools as a way to try to actively attack bias that might exist at different places in the process, it's important to choose tools where you have adequate transparency into what's happening, where you've had a role maybe in training the tool and you can actually validate that it's doing what you want. And I think the most important thing in finding an area to target is looking at how decisions are being made right now or how they're being made in the past. So maybe you have some very simple algorithm or heuristic that decides when to send out direct mailers. And maybe it's going based on zip code or based on high school or something like that. And that might have been a sensible way to sort of economize resources in the past. But now we know that there are a lot of biases baked into deciding things by zip code or deciding things by high school. And there is opportunity now to use AI to make decisions in a much more intelligent way and in a way that can be actually measured for bias. We can take what we know about zip code or high school and measure things and guide the tool to be making fair and equitable decisions based on what it knows. And so we can ensure, by whatever criteria we choose to set, we can make sure that those mailers are being sent out in a fair and equitable way. And this is, one of many examples, but I think the starting point needs to be, how do decisions get made right now, and where could bias be sneaking in?
And I think if I could add to that, it's not a direct correlation so much, but understanding how to use AI responsibly and what are the outcomes if it's not used responsibly gets back to how we are teaching our high schoolers to use it responsibly and the potential outcomes that can happen if not used responsibly, right? So trying to help, they're always they feel like a couple steps ahead of me, but trying to find out how they're using it and make sure that as they're using it, they're understanding that responsibility so that the AI doesn't get built around, false statements.
Thank you. And so taking that conversation just one step further, and I actually might circle around and ask Rose to start and see if others have more feedback. What role can AI play in leveling the playing field then for students with less access to, let's say, high quality counseling? So Megan, you've given an example that where you are currently, the curriculum is trying to integrate responsible use of AI, but we know that that's not happening everywhere yet. So when we think about students who, again, maybe just have less access to these conversations, is there any guidance we can give them? Is there anything that we can say, yeah, this might help in your college application process, beyond maybe making that list? What other pieces should students be considering? What can we offer them? Rose, would you be comfortable responding to this to start?
Sure. Yeah. I think general purpose models are so diverse in the way that you can use them for so many different things. And so I think, for students or communities or people that don't have access to resources like a counselor, they can, you know, configure that persona for in a chatbot through the way that they prompt it. And so saying, giving it a role and saying, act as a admissions counselor, or act as a grad school counselor, or whatever role it is that you want, giving the AI that persona, and setting that stage, and then asking your questions is really helpful and can provide a better output specific to the type of information that you're looking for, rather than just saying, I need help, or what should I do to do X, Y, and Z. Kind of establishing that role is going to be really helpful. I think something else is making use of features within some of these chat interfaces from various companies, where you can kind of create folders, or you can organize information so that there's context for the AI when it's responding, can be really helpful. So things like, your resume, or maybe your volunteer experience, you can, add that into the conversation, prompt it with that role, and then you're getting really tailored and specific feedback or an output. And of course, this is a supplement or a tool. And so, if you have access to humans with, real experience and world experience, that's helpful as well. But, that's an opportunity for those that may not have that access.
Fantastic. I'm making my own note on this, by the way, because now I feel like I probably need to go do a pilot to see what responses we get. Thinking about the example, Sungwoo, that you spoke to at your previous institution, using AI to do some predictive modeling. If you and Nathan, either one of you, would be interested in chiming in on this, are you familiar with any examples that higher ed is using currently in the admission process? So you don't necessarily have to name the institution, but anything in particular that jumps to mind where AI, from an ethical standpoint, is being used, again, in the college admission process.
I actually do not have specific examples that I know of personally. When we were at the University of Oregon, I mean, this is no secret, but there was constant leadership shakeup. And so we didn't have an actual chance to interface directly with the admissions office, even though we were tasked to use a lot of the different data that we had across the university. So there are a few political issues there and leadership issues that prevented us from knowing much at all about the admissions process at the University of Oregon. Um, yeah, Nathan or anyone else on this panel?
Yeah, I've had informal conversations with people from a few institutions who are using AI to support the SEM management process. Some of this would be uh, where do we allocate resources? Like, I mean, direct mail is a pretty old school example to use for AI, but to allocate resources like that, which students are predicted to be on the fence, which students are, still considering, we think, enough to merit investing resources in follow-up to try to recruit them, which students are certain to attend if accepted, and then we don't need to waste quote unquote resources on them. So there are places that have sort of pilot programs, I guess I would say. Maybe some of them have matured by now, making resource allocation decisions in various parts of the various stages of the SEM funnel using AI. But unfortunately, I am not aware of places that are terribly public about this. And this is, I think, one of the biggest issues is that there is a lack of transparency into what's happening. And the people I've met with are people acting in good faith, trying to level the playing field as much as they can, but it's anyone's guess whose definition they're using of what a level playing field would look like or how we should get there. So I'm not aware of any really exemplary institutions that are doing this in a transparent way, and especially I would say in a way that involves a broad range of stakeholders, students especially. So I think that is ground yet to cover, although I would love to be wrong about that.
I was just going to add on to that. It's no surprise to any of us that college admissions has become far more intense and competitive than when any of us went to college, and continues to do so. One of the ways colleges will evaluate a candidate's, application is by demonstrated interest. Has that student demonstrated interest in our school, or are they just applying to us as a backup? Is sort of the thought behind it. And so it's a little bit freaky, but I've been told by our college reps, several of them, and I pass it on to the students as well, that they have AI that in place that's able to not only keep track of if you have followed them on, social media, but are you opening their emails? Are you scrolling through the emails? Are you checking links in the emails? And that is a whole another level of sort of like, wow, college admissions, okay, you just amped it up again. So I can't speak to what those products are that are that the AI is that they're using, but I have been told by many colleagues on the college side that that is what's happening.
And I'm happy to chime in on that. And I think, as someone who sits in one of those positions, we actually receive a lot of phone calls every year from students and families, supporters, asking that exact question, Megan. Does it matter? Like, do I have to come to campus in order to be admitted? Or do I have to send a separate email? I can speak to my institution, which at this point, the answer is no. We're looking holistically at the credentials. And I think we're seeing a mix, right? There are certainly a lot of colleges who will say, yeah, demonstrated interest is a piece of this, and we can use an AI tool to kind of navigate that and go formally into that process. I want to back up just a second. Nathan, you mentioned something. One of the questions, we had some questions that came in earlier, and there was a question about kind of how do you create a collaborative space around AI so that when we're institutions, whether a high school or obviously the college admissions side, when we're thinking about the use of AI and the ethical use of AI, what stakeholders should we have around the table? How do we actually engage a broad range of individuals? And again, I'm going to start with you, Nathan, because you mentioned something, you tapped on this, and then Rose, you also spoke to it. So, but anybody who would like to chime in after Nathan, I think is helpful for all of us, depending on where folks are sitting.
Yeah, I love this question. I mean, the answer that is like on one level so obvious and on another level always sends people spinning is to talk to students. Put students in a room and tell them what you're trying to do, and ask if it's aligned with their goals, if it's a privacy sacrifice that they think is worthwhile. Ask what they want, and does this feel aligned with their interests or not, and how do we change it to be better aligned? So that this I think to me is the most important. One other thing that we did at Oregon was we brought a lot of people from the advising office and the student success office in general. This is kind of, future-proofing a little bit, or just looking ahead to later in someone's career. How do we keep their best interests at heart? And we also met with some faculty in the philosophy department who are scholars of ethics, nor notions of ethics as contested in the literature and the scholarly debate for thousands of years. And right, depending on your position, that could be super helpful. That could be the most important thing. Or depending on your position, compared to talking to students, maybe that's totally meaningless. And so these are kind of case by case conversations that I think should happen with as many people in the room as possible. And they need to be really guided by institutional values of what it is you're trying to achieve, and whose version of expertise do you think is most important? Is it academic or professional or lived experience? And these things can coexist, but there will probably be conflicts, and it's hard to navigate that.
I'd add a general counsel's office, marketing and communications within the university. Those were also two big players that we constantly were in contact with regard to how we were using AI on behalf of student success.
I think something that Nathan raised, and I think also Megan, you mentioned about kind of what sounds like a bit of surveillance. I think it's so important that there is consent from students, and that they understand, kind of what they are agreeing to or not agreeing to. It's important to have that proactive, informed consent. And giving people the option to opt out if it's not something that they're interested in, I think is something that is very top of mind for me, hearing both of you speak. And so I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you for that, because I think it is a little bit like the Wild Wild West right now. I think that will be something that comes forward in another couple of years, more consent in that sort of demonstrated interest through AI. I have not witnessed that yet, but it could be in the small print that I don't see.
I have a little bit of a pivot, but again, kind of keeping along these lines when we're thinking about our students and what types of things college admission offices are using on the AI side. We are seeing more college admission offices, just as many budgets are kind of hitting a wall, or we're thinking about capacity for our humans that are employed in these places. Universities, like any other systems, are looking for AI to do certain levels of the work, right? Not just on the back end anymore, so not just the data and the analytics, but actually reaching out to prospective students. And we're seeing that increasing a bit more rapidly than I think a few of us would have guessed a few years ago. So Megan, I'm curious, have any of your students weighed in, or have you heard anything from your colleagues about the reaction from students, families, supporters, school counselors of an AI system actually doing the initial touch point and reaching out to a student?
I- Sure, AI, but I think it's kind of old school AI. I think many of the sophomores and juniors across the United States take the PSAT in October every year. And I know that a lot of universities will buy the addresses or the email addresses of students who achieve certain scores. Other than that, I haven't noticed anything either besides that whole wild, wild west of social media, just blowing up. And I honestly, I can't speak to it because it's too fast. I haven't had the time to sort of process it all. And I'm also not as young as I used to be. I'm not on all the platforms as the kids are. And so I think there is some stuff happening, and I'm sorry I can't speak to which ways it's happening.
Oh, no, no, that I would say maybe that's a good thing. You never know, depending on which, it'll be a matter of time. In a
Yeah.
week, you'll reach out and say, hey,
Exactly.
had someone come in and they got a call from an AI recruiter.
Yes. That has
But
not happened. It's been a lot of, I will also give the caveat that I'm at an independent school with a small student population. And so most of our conversations or contact with the universities, whether it's, on my side, the colleagues or with the students, is direct human to human contact. We have reps such as your school who are willing to talk to our students and meet with them. Many of them come to campus and are able to create those human relationships. And so that I have not seen changed or turned into AI so much.
well, I appreciate that. So kicking it back over from kind of a what are we seeing and what can we do tools wise? Some of the folks who registered were just sort of curious. All right, so we know we're all being thrust into AI, whether we like it or not. And again, how do we do this well and responsibly? And that is part of kind of what the conversation is. So in thinking about that across colleges, I'm curious if anybody, and I had actually touched upon this, if anyone on the panel, whether it's college or high school, has an example of what they would call a success story of AI that either assisted a student as they moved forward with the college process, assisted a college in that process, a family, anything of sort. Does anybody have an example that they would be willing to share where someone directly engaged with AI in a positive way during the college admission process? And I am happy to kick us off while you think about this one. So I will share, I have the privilege of sitting where I do, but I do still go into some high schools just because that's where we started. So we love to work with students. And we've been talking with students kind of around the pipeline, right? So Megan, you spoke a little bit about the 9th and 10th grade classes, and they're coming into this space with a very different perception from the students who are applying to college right now or getting their decisions right now. AI is kind of just a given. And so we've been working with some students in that space and trying to, similar to your comment about curriculum, from the college side, explain to them what things we would feel comfortable at our institution with them utilizing. So we talked about some of these tools. Use it as a baseline, right? Start to become familiar. Try to put your thoughts into one place, but you still have to go through. You still have to rewrite that. Make sure it's a good indicator that it's what you want to submit. And we've given examples of times when students have not done that. So we're trying to teach students at a younger age what we would consider healthy, responsible use with AI to help them in that college process. I also have some colleagues at 2 other institutions that come to mind where they're thinking about, again, on the college review side, how can they respond faster, right? And so that would be a space where AI has actually come in very helpful. We know we've got students with a lot of different activities. They may have a job, family responsibilities, school, different time zones. And so even just having basic platforms where we can get students the information they're looking for directly from the college around the clock. And as much as I wish people would, take a little bit of a break sometimes, that has really helped some students who otherwise wouldn't have the ability to get those answers. It would take them that much longer because they maybe only have access at a certain time of day. And that's not when the offices are open. And to Nathan's point, there's so much information out on the web that sometimes they get lost in the process. So using AI and feeding that information into the AI systems in universities, so we can say, this is the process, this is what we're looking for. Students have found that quite helpful. But I am curious if anyone has any additional stories, examples, or places that maybe you see AI evolving, where it is going to be beneficial. And again, remain in the ethical framework that we're discussing when we think about college admission?
I'll go there. A student who presents us with an essay or a personal statement that has been generated by ChatGPT, and using that moment as a teachable moment to help them understand that not only is this not your most authentic self that you're putting forward, but you're missing a major opportunity to showcase who you are. And there is a difference between reading something that's been generated by GPT and something that's been generated by you. So by the time we are seeing that in senior year, we're able to sort of discern maybe that wasn't authentically written from top to bottom, or maybe there's a piece in there that it just doesn't ring the same as the rest of it. And again, that's something that we use as an opportunity to teach them that you're missing the opportunity to showcase who you are.
I'd imagine that, with I think what I've heard is that there's more applications that are being sent by students than ever before, and kind of just the volume of the admissions process is just growing. When it comes to volume-based processes or workflows, I'd imagine that there's a great opportunity for AI to assist in some level of initial assessment, some segmentation, perhaps just checking for basic admissions requirements have been met. Of course, I think similarly to when you are using AI for recruitment for the workforce, there has to be that option to say, I'm comfortable with having AI process my application, and there being no, retaliatory or negative impact on deciding to click that button. But not that I've seen this in practice myself, but I just imagine that there's many ways that AI can support the admissions process.
Thank you both. So I'm getting my mute off there. Thank you both for that. I think we do know we could have this conversation in 6 months, and I feel like we'll be addressing very, very different topics because, as we mentioned in the beginning, this is how rapidly this space is evolving. So AI in college admission, as I mentioned, which is sponsoring this conversation, one of the reasons that organization was started by NACAC members was because this was so new, right? And this just 12 months ago, it was so new. There was not a lot of literature out there or guidance on what folks were doing on either side of the college admission process. So again, school counselors supporting their students and their families, college admission offices trying to make sure that they are being equitable in their practices. And so that particular group has started pulling together, when we find them, policies, best practices on college websites where they're saying, this is our philosophy on the use of AI in the college admission process. So we're starting to see more and more colleges developing statements, some of which will be located in their application, that very specifically identifies what's an acceptable ethical use of AI in the college admission process and what has now pushed over that line and could jeopardize a student's possibility of being admitted to that school. So as we pull all of these resources together, like I said, this particular organization, we're trying to pull those pieces, although there's a lot of stakeholders, as we mentioned. So general counsels at different institutions obviously are looking at things differently. We have some high schools who are enthusiastically embracing the idea of having their students use AI to help in these ways. And we have others that are a little bit more apprehensive. One of the conversations that came up a little separately from this, again, thinking about school counselors, and Megan, you've given some phenomenal ideas and suggestions and things that are happening, I think, in your space, thinking about educating the students themselves as they're moving through the process. I'm curious if anyone, without going too far off topic, that you're familiar with or others, has utilized AI as the school counselor themselves, not just for workflow, but there are tools like letters of rec, right? So how do you write 500 letters of recommendation as a counselor who has a load that large? What types of things can we help our colleagues think about when they're moving forward? And I'm just curious if Nathan, Sangwoo, I'm going to start with the two of you, if there's any additional kind of words of wisdom, tools, places that you've heard of, things that you've seen or you've spoken to somebody about that they were just really excited about and it changed their day-to-day work pattern as it relates to either the high school side, college side, anything in particular, or if you had to predict what might be coming our way, where you think AI might be jumping into next, either side of this.
I can make some predictions. As you said, who knows what will happen in 6 months? But I think we're seeing AI work its way into a lot of standard issue productivity software, and I don't think that the trend is likely to reverse. And so, in this case, admissions is not really so different from anything else. If you're, from the perspective of Outlook as an email client, it doesn't care what you're doing. It will try to help automate stuff. So I think that's gonna continue. Um, I think we'll see more decision making done by AI, whether that's something fairly simple, where do we think this student is on their, is this a safety or are they truly interested? Some of that could just be from demonstrated interest, or it could be really simple test scores and history of applicants from their high school, things like that. And I think it's room to mention chatbots also. I think this plays into the very good point that was made about access in different time zones and with different scheduling constraints. The more information that can be available in an accessible way through a chatbot is from that perspective a win. And I think we're actually working right now, and we're seeing in general some big improvements in the quality of those chatbots, and especially in their ability to be sort of empathic agents who are not quite so cold and clinical, but can offer maybe even some emotional support in what is a pretty stressful process. So I think we'll see improvements in the quality of chatbots. We'll see more decisions made with AI somewhere in the loop, hopefully not taking humans out of the loop completely. And I think we'll see it make its way into all sorts of standard productivity tools as it has already begun to.
Thanks, Nathan. And just some general, I guess, more technical thoughts. I've long held the belief for several years now, even back in like the mid 2010s when I started thinking more about machine learning. AI, I think, is really useful when I think of it as a helper for a resource constraint. So if you're in a situation where you have thousands of applications that you have to read and understand in a couple of weeks, I mean, that's where I think something like this can technically really help, because you're trying to process hundreds of thousands of words, possibly pages, in a very constrained amount of time, and you need a tool to help you do that. And so, when I've been helping and talking to some of these local college counselors, there's a local high school here that has about 3,200 students, 9 through 12. So they said the senior class is about 700 students, of which maybe 400 or 500 students are probably applying to a four-year college. There's one college counselor for that entire school. So anything that one person cannot handle has to be diffused to the other more generalist counselors that are at the school. And so that is a severe resource constraint that has to be addressed somehow. I mean, you have 400 or 500 students who are applying to, on average now, like 15, 20 schools, and they have many essays to complete for each of those schools. You have to have a tool or a series of tools to help lessen the burden of that one particular college counselor. As Nathan mentioned, with regard to chatbots and empathic chatbots, I think those are also going to be something that can be very useful for what Nathan said. And I completely agree. It's one of the most intense, stressful periods, I think, in anyone's life, trying to apply to 15, 20 different schools and trying to get into as many of them as possible. So having some sort of AI agent to help through that process, not just technically, but emotionally supportive as well, I think that that would be very useful for students.
Thank you both. We are nearing the end of our time. I do want to give our panelists an opportunity if they have any kind of closing thoughts, words of wisdom that they'd like to share, or anything in particular that you think. Really, again, understand that on the particular webinar that we're offering, we've got a mix of school counselors, we have some folks in private industry, and we have some individuals, obviously on the higher ed side, and that this is accessible to the public or anybody that's following, AI and college admission. Anything in particular folks would like to share or things they would just like to close up with? And I'm actually going to call on folks. So Megan, if you don't mind, if I start with you, that would be fantastic.
That's fine. Thank you. I think it's really important when working with students and young people, which I do, to teach them the philosophy that AI is used to prepare what you need, whether that be a list or some research or some thoughts or your calendar, but it's not to replace your own brain, your own thinking. That's not how responsible AI use should be. And so always thinking of it in that sort of like it's another tool, not another brain for you. And I just wanted to touch on what Sung Woo just said about, you know, the ability of someone with 500 students on their caseload. Equity is a real problem everywhere, but also in college admissions. And I would love for just us as a community to be getting closer to having more equitable opportunities for everyone. And it's just not fair that one teacher, one counselor has 500 letters to write, and I have 30. So if anybody's developing some tools, that would be great. I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. Rose, anything you'd like to offer?
Yeah, I'd like to offer that people take the time to really learn some fundamentals and foundations around AI in terms of how it works, because I think that's going to help inform the way that you interact with it and enable you to interact with it in a more responsible way. Without having the insight into the way that AI makes decisions or how it's developed, it can be challenging to really be informed and kind of and make decisions that are aligned with kind of your values and your morals. And so I'd encourage you to take some time to learn the fundamentals and not try to just kind of skip over it or just hope to get by. I think the more and more advanced that AI becomes, it's going to be even more beneficial that you have that, excuse me, that strong foundation, that strong understanding. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Yes, agreed. And constantly going back to that information and updating ourselves is also certainly helpful. Sungwoo, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, my final thoughts are sort of a hybrid of Megan and Rose's. The understanding of AI, as Rose mentioned, I think is really useful because people, I think, really need to know like the basic statistics and like math and computer science behind AI. And that will help inform them what AI can do and what it can't do for them. It's not like a magic potion that will just like cure everything. There's a statistical and like computer science way of like approaching AI that I think will help people and understand its limitations. And then to Megan's point about it not being a brain, I've had many high school students come up to me and like say, I want to like be like a business major at Stanford and like go on about becoming a business major. And I'll eventually have to tell them there is no business major as an undergraduate at Stanford. And if you had taken a look at the court, like the major lists that's publicly available on like a Google search, you would probably have known that. And so sometimes I think no AI could have like told this student there is no business major, like even an AI tool that will help synthesize all this great information about Stanford it's of no use if that student doesn't really understand like the true clear answer of a question. So I just wanted to echo that point as well.
A very valid one, by the way. We hear similar things on our end. Thank you. And then Nathan, anything you'd like to add?
Very little. I think this has been extremely well covered. I'm sure everyone's tired of hearing about this, but I'm happy to be the one to do the nagging. AI, it's not fabricating its answers out of nowhere. It's learning from human output and past human decisions. And we know that there's a lot of bias and bad stuff in past human decisions and past human output. And it's naive to assume that we'll get away from that just by taking humans out of the loop. And this is such an easy trap to fall into, as someone considering adopting a new AI tool. And so I think it's really important that we fight for transparency and accountability and the the um, the chance to validate what's actually happening in new tools. And I think that's only going to happen if we collectively decide to make that profitable to the people making the software. And that's not happening right now. And so I think we collectively have an obligation to insist on that, or else it's just not going to happen.
Well stated, Nathan. And all of our guests, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. Like I said, so much to cover and a lot more happening. So we hope to have a follow-up, a few months down the line, and we'll kind of see where AI stands at that point. So much happening in the higher ed space right now. So again, thank you so much, Megan, Sungwoo, Nathan, and Rose for taking some time today. And for those who have joined us, thank you very much. And you certainly can reach out to us through AI and college admission, and we're more than happy to relay any of the additional questions that may come through. So thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone. Be well.
You're most welcome.
Thank you.